good do you really think your favorite old school anime is in comparison to whatever new generation adaptation that all the kids are crazy about on TikTok nowadays? Especially when it comes to anime all the way from the 90s up to the early 2000s, when this whole anime niche was still barely accessible and so undersaturated. That anime like Cowboy Bebop and Berserk and Evangelion and Akira, Death Note, Full Metal Alchemist, Ghost in the Shell, and even anime like Ouran Host Club High School were able to rise to the top of the standards of quality anime. And anime series like Trigun also stood in those leagues that remain prime in our nostalgia. But would the quality of all those old school anime really stand the test of time? Or would the pacing and plot development and animation or problematic relationships not actually age so well with respect to the service that they gave to the culture? And I really mean this because honestly, some of these older animes aren't as great as we boast as the greatest of all time that could never be surpassed, despite all the new talent and technology in this new generation of anime. And when it comes to Trigun, the anime internet got its feathers ruffled again all over the new adaptation of Trigun Stampede 2023. So welcome to Sister Punk Studios, I'm Keisha, and make sure you stay tuned for my breakdown of the anime series Trigun and Trigun Stampede, to find out which is the truest version of the story of the humanoid typhoon. And make sure you like and subscribe to join the punk family. When it comes to what's different in this Trigun Stampede adaptation versus the original, there are definite key themes about the settings and characters that have been completely lost. But there's also a lot of romanticization of the 1998 Trigun series. And despite its anime legacy, many series with its budget were tarnished by slideshow animation, a bunch of filler episodes, changes and cuts to really important parts of the manga series, and admittedly stupid directions that were upgraded and reconceptualized in the new anime adaptation, with actually even more faithfulness to the original manga. OG fans might be having a bias for the original Trigun because that's the only Trigun that we've ever known. But not every anime remake can get Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood treatment. But now, in the new, flashy, and trendy, computer-generated and color-saturated animation, we no longer have that old, wild Western vibe that really brought immersion and mystery to the story's setting. But I'm really trying not to be too hard on this effort towards CGI animation and dismiss this series as a whole because of its style. The CGI in Trigun Stampede is brought to us by Studio Orange, and they've done some really impressive work in visual storytelling when it comes to series like Land of the Lustrous and Beastars. And this is a really high-level attempt at trying to get more human-like features, but still paying homage to the original animation design. But at times, even the flashiest scenes are a little less impressive than the grit of the OG animation. Like the infamous scene of our main character Vash dodging bullets felt so suspenseful and intense in the original series with just a single still shot, but it actually ended up feeling cartoonishly overdone in the Stampede adaptation, with everything moving like an erratic, wobbly sugar rush. Vash moves like he's this hyper-flexible Bruce Lee or something. But when I remember his fighting style, if you could even call it that in the original series, it brought more attention to him using that big-ass gun of his in order to outsmart and ricochet bullets all over the place in order to defeat his attackers without actually taking any lives, of course. But this might also be my own bias. 1998 Trigun had such an intentionally slow build-up to revealing all of this lost technology, and there are very few clues to establish that we're located on an entirely different planet, until you notice the double suns and the weird giant chickens that they're riding around like horses. But instead, in 2023 Stampede, we see a lot of high-tech technology like computer screens and communication and different kinds of vehicles. And we also spend a lot more time in these chrome-plated power plants. And we also get so much more detail on that shiny new robot arm that they gave Vash in order to upgrade his dexterity and utilities. And even the style of dress is a lot more modern, with lots of current-day fashion silhouettes and tons of accessories, with bubble coats and loafers and tech-wear-style armor. And the characters are also vastly different, not just in their character design, but also in the way that they're presented and developed. First of all, let me just get this out of the way. We don't even have Millie Thompson for this series. And that lovable, soft-spoken, big ol' bitch was a cherished character of the original anime. Her comedic and lighthearted persona really worked to balance out the neurotic goody two-shoes that was Meryl Streif. And I don't really care that their occupation changed from being the insurance agent gag to turning into a reporter, but what really changed was Meryl's own personality now that Millie was cut from the cast. Meryl has so much more of this whimsical personality now. She's very naive, clumsy, and innocent, but still filled with this heroism to follow and document Vash's journey. Even though he is the world's most dangerous humanoid typhoon, Meryl wants to know more about this world's secret past and the purpose that humanity has been stranded on. But at times, honestly, she's also kind of annoying and would stand right in front of danger like a deer in headlights, which is definitely far from her previous preparedness to whip out her pistols if she was in danger or, you know, run away. I mean, yeah, Meryl would get caught in damsel in distress situations with Millie and old school Trigun, but they would often have really comedic ways of getting out of these situations and still be able to be involved in the main plot without being a burden to our characters unless it was crucial to developing the plot. Instead of the quirky duo, Meryl and Millie, we get this grumpy, drunken beardo who is very lazily named Roberto De Niro, and his job is pretty much to babysit young Meryl Streif, who looks like she's obsessed with the Vash the Stampede Bad Boys Club. De Niro constantly has to pluck her out of damn near getting killed, or stopping her from running headfirst into situations that she has no business being a part of and can't do anything to assist with. And I'm just as exhausted as this man is having to deal with her, and risking his own life in order to further Meryl and Vash's admittedly amazing chemistry. And Vash is also still innocent and childish, and definitely irresponsibly heroic with his own personality. And the over-the-top animated banter between Meryl and Vash still fills up that goofy, lighthearted space that I think really belongs in this series. But by the end of the series, Meryl definitely ends up getting pushed to take the responsibility for her own actions and ethics into her own hands. Alright, so let's just do a quick recap of the plot for this series. In both series, this remains in the far future, when Earth has become uninhabitable, forcing humanity to evacuate in these colony fleets to search for another planet. But in order to sustain the fleets and the colonies that they're eventually gonna build, humanity has also created plants as artificial life forms that can create infinite clean energy. And in one colony fleet, two brothers named Vash and Knives are born with this special variation to these plants. And they end up being cared for by one of the spaceship scientists named Rem, who really loves them as if they were her own children. However, the colony's fleet suddenly malfunctions, causing the entire fleet to crash on this arid planet called No Man's Land. And Rem ends up sacrificing herself to save Vash and Knives, and also recalibrate and save as many ships as possible with literally the last remnants of the human species that are still cryogenically frozen and unaware of their new desolate future. But Vash is mortified to learn that his brother Knives is responsible for this disaster, and that Knives is seeking to kill all humans for exploiting the power of plants. After years of wandering this new Earth, Vash and Knives end up separating over their irreconcilable differences that could probably only be solved if there was only one of them. But on the bright side, many years later, the survivors of the colony fleets have built several cities on this new planet of No Man's Land. But they're still totally dependent on these power plants in order to survive these barren conditions. And now, adult Vash wanders the desert aimlessly, having been brandished an outlaw named the Humanoid Typhoon, while Knives continues his schemes to destroy every city that humans try to build up and takes on the name Millions Knives. And the original anime also follows this same plotline, but we see that Vash has more of this goofy, pacifist personality, and Meryl Streif and Millie Thompson end up following him around trying to minimize damages. But other characters that we meet in the journey, like Nicholas D. Wolfwood, end up seeing right past Vash's facade. And behind all of the fake smiles, he sees the years of pain and self-loathing that has been burdening Vash. But speaking of that holy devilish man, we also get more of this anti-hero vibe from this new adaptation of Nicholas D. Wolfwood, which is suiting for the Punisher, who has now become the Undertaker. Wolfwood claims to be a righteous but half-assed man of God and carries around a giant crucifix filled up with machine guns. However, in the original anime, he doesn't get as much backstory and development. Vash just ends up meeting Wolfwood in the desert, and they kinda get caught up in the same events and become partners. Wolfwood in the OG Trigun is simply a badass priest who lived a pretty rough life and works as a mercenary in order to send money back to his own orphanage. Wolfwood in the new Stampede, however, has his own plotline going on that is independently and intrinsically linked to the agenda of Knives and the humanoid weapons that his scientists are building against humanity. Wolfwood isn't just a wandering funeral priest, he's an executioner for a division of Knives' organization. Wolfwood was taken away when he himself was an orphan child by one of Knives' organization called the Eye of Michael. And Wolfwood was injected with all of these experimental drugs and surgeries over the course of months when he was just a kid. The drugs enhanced his body, but also prematurely aged him into an adult. In their attempt to infuse the human body with these enhancements similar to the plant beings, and then retrieve Vash in order to be a subject to Knives' master objective to create a new superior race. But in either case, Wolfwood has to still deal with his own past that has made him so bitter and untrusting. And he's very easy to anger with a very big trigger finger. But he's also influenced in this new adaptation by Vash into valuing life more, even if it means going against the violent way of living that he's always known. So even though this series is more brightly animated and boisterous, it is indeed a darker retelling of the story of Vash the Stampede, whose happiness isn't so much goofy anymore, as much as it is still a sad but gentle hopefulness. And this internalized guilt from all of the lives that have been lost because of his existence, and the conflicting connection he feels to his egotistical, sadistic brother, Knives. The beauty of this new adaptation of TRIGUN Stampede is that we get to see these brothers really battle it out, not just as adults, but we also see their childhood when they were still on a spaceship filled with humans searching for a new life and a new planet. And it's important to remember that Vash and Knives are independent plants, literal humanoid power plants. And the pseudoscience behind this is that these plants are cloned from an original cell and have somehow given birth to fully conscious beings who can communicate and connect with other power plants in the way that we see Vash try to repair all these different cities' power plants, but he refers to them as his siblings. But the source of these plants' powers come from a totally different dimension that exists on a higher plane and can actually potentially give all of these plants a real soul. And this is the justification behind what Knives is trying to do in order to save and cultivate his siblings into an entirely new race, instead of these plant beings just existing to be encaged as mere materials that can be used for power, dissected and destroyed, and all at the whim of humans who have destroyed their own world time and time again. And that's where we get to the part where the bad guy is problematic but also kind of right. But anyway, we have so much more information about these power plants in the new series, and what really makes Vash so independent and valuable in this world. And we also get to learn more about the mission that brings humanity to a new planetary frontier, which I feel is really the focus in this new adaptation. And this is an important background story that is incredibly impactful, but doesn't even get mentioned until halfway through the original series, which is honestly a huge fault of 1998 TRIGUN. I feel like this new iteration of TRIGUN Stampede jumps right into the high-tech lore and gives this exposition that really adds urgency to the plot all the way in the first episode, which is admittedly kinda needed with today's short attention spans and trying to compete with all of this new-gen anime. This biotech is also the power that Knives use in order to create the world-destroying weapons that are he and his brother's guns. But Knives still justifies his actions in the name of freeing his siblings from being used and exploited and potentially extinguished by the human population. And Knives genuinely sees himself and Vash and his power plant siblings as being superior to human beings, who end up squandering their power in their fight for dominance. But ironically, Knives is prepared to do the exact same thing, to exploit and sacrifice his own brother to remake the world in his own image, to fulfill his ideals by turning his brother Vash into an extension of his weapons of mass destruction against humanity. But it's not up to Vash or Knives or anyone else to decide who gets to live or die, because that's what their caretaker Rem taught them on that spaceship long ago when they were still kids, and when they still had hopes for a future and a better humanity. But Vash ends up living with this weighted guilt of lives that he promised to save and failed, or made their existence worse in the wake of his destruction, including the very spaceship crash that stranded all of humanity on this desolate planet. But there's still a lot of crucial times where Vash having these pacifist dreams, which all come from his idealizations of Rem, ends up feeling really childish, considering the reality of the circumstances that he's already witnessed. Vash's mindset is for him to save everyone, which is all good, but contradictions arise when you consider all of the people who had to die because Vash refused to take action. It's like realizing that peace is possible, but struggle is kind of inevitable. And I feel like this conflict is what really is addressed in the original series. Countless people have already died when Vash could have stopped the fight in a second. But on the other hand, his partner Wolfwood operates in this binary of the right to kill in order to protect the good and defeat the bad. And we really challenge the complexities of the right to kill and the duty to protect in the original series when we look at the standoff with Zazie the Beast. Instead of Zazie being this alien mutant that works with Knives as this embodiment of the planet in the new series, Zazie in the original anime is an actual child who thinks that he can control others and his own destiny through the power of violence. But in that instant when Zazie held a gun against Vash, I really don't think that he would have shot, and I think that Vash realized that Zazie was just a kid with messed up emotions that could still be restored. But even with Vash trying to influence Wolfwood into his no-kill policy, Wolfwood's behavior after that decided that even a kid like Zazie can be a bad guy who can get it, especially if there's no other option to survive or protect someone else. But these do-or-die methods really just end up leading to revenge and hate, and couldn't even end up in a more perfect or even a better world. These contradictions forces Vash to acknowledge that even though he tries to maintain his ideals and not take any lives, others can still be enabled by his pacifism to execute harm on the innocent. And there are certain circumstances where others' lives have to be sacrificed in order to protect. And there's so much disagreement about whether it's even possible to live in peace with no war or stealing, but it's really because of the way that people assume that each human has their own desire and greed, and if one of them disagree, then it has to mean war. But I don't believe that humans are truly motivated only by greed or material wealth. People just want to be happy and want to have the opportunity to make their own happiness and identity, instead of being coerced into these social contracts at the threat of death. Instead, we can finally cooperate not just with each other, but also with the planet that we inhabit. But when it comes to this adaptation of TRIGUN Stampede, I feel like there are a lot of spaces that were intentionally left open. And there's so much foreshadowing to events that haven't even occurred that are primed to be reimagined. The last episodes bring us into the looming destruction of the City of July, and potentially the total obliteration of the planet that was really just a hazy flashback in the last series. And these events start to awaken Vash to his responsibilities, to bring an end to this massacre and the inevitable battle between him and his brother, and try to work out their painful struggle of being misunderstood. And all of this is going to determine the fate of plants and humanity, and the fate of Vash and his brother. And Vash is prepared to run from the consequences of his own power for the rest of his existence, in order to avoid another tragedy or an all-out standoff. And damn, that CGI actually really shines in these insane fight scenes. The emotions were running so high in that sequence between Vash and Knives, and the three-dimensional camera work added so much atmosphere and drama and made it so engaging to watch. There's so much potential for these creators not to just retell the story of Vash the Stampede, but to recreate it entirely. The way our characters in this first season of TRIGUN Stampede 2023 are forced through world-changing events and the loss of so much life. in order to fight back and find their own purpose and step into their fully realized self. I agree with the online hypothesis that this is very likely the prequel to the tone of the 1998 Trigun that we all remember. But it's taking what we thought we knew and setting the stage to go beyond and even bigger and better, to make the story deeper with higher stakes, and really bring the impact to this new adaptation that honestly a great anime like Trigun really deserves. Let me know what you guys think about the new Trigun Stampede versus the original Trigun right down in the comments. But I totally think that you should give both of these anime adaptations a chance so that new developments don't get scrapped right after the first season, and that way we can get something new out of something great while appreciating where this anime came from. But make sure you like and subscribe for my huge catalog of anime reviews, my city and travel vlogs, and my music for my punk family. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.